first, live, local. This is Fox 12 Now.
Hello, everyone. I'm Greg Nibbler. This is Fox 12 Now. Thank you for joining us here live from our digital news desk at the Fox 12 Oregon headquarters. And what we're going to be talking about today is the big news that we found out from this morning, which was from an FBI press conference happening at 11 a.m., detailing a multi-state kidnapping case and some of the implications that are coming out of that. So I'll recap what we know from the press conference this morning, what we've learned so far. Again, this is all from the FBI, from the information that they revealed. And then we're going to go into it a little bit more. I've got Professor Tung from Lewis and Clark College who's going to be joining me here in just a minute. But in case you don't know, to give you the details here of what we found out. On or around July 15th, around midnight, a woman in Seattle was taken by a man claiming to be an undercover police officer. He was not an undercover police officer. That man's name is who we have right here. We're going to go ahead and show you his picture. This is, again, released from the FBI. Negasi Zuberi. Those are two different pictures of him right there. He goes by a couple of other nicknames, Sakima, Justin Hike, and Justin Kawasi. We'll get back into that here in a minute. So he did take this woman. He handcuffed her, allegedly placed leg irons on her, and then was sexually assaulting her, all while transporting her from Seattle down to Klamath Falls, Oregon. So quite a long drive from there. Took her to Klamath Falls, Oregon, where she was placed in a makeshift cell in a garage in a home there. And we have the pictures of this, again, released by the FBI. These are the pictures of this makeshift cell. We've got a few different ones. She was placed in there, and subsequently, she was left alone for some amount of time, and she was able to escape this cell. She got out, she found help, she was able to call 911, and then from there an investigation was started. At some point, this gentleman, again, Negasi Zuberi, went on the run, went to Reno, Nevada, where sometime during the next hours or next day was apprehended there in Reno after about a 45-minute standoff. We believe that was with the Nevada State Patrol, but I don't have that exactly down. But it was in Reno where he was apprehended, and he is in custody right now in Washoe County there in Nevada. The FBI said they are working on getting him extradited back to Oregon to face some of these charges. But the key thing here is that they believe multiple different women could be potentially already victims of him, and they want to find out information about that. So they've put out some different ways to get a hold of the FBI if you have information on that. But there's several states that they believe this guy was living in, this man was living in during this time. California, Washington, Oregon, Colorado, Utah, Florida, New York, New Jersey, Alabama, and Nevada, and that's just over the last, I believe within the last year. So they do think that there are other victims out there, and they're looking for information on that. And this is an active investigation. So there's where we're at right now with some of the information that we know from the FBI. What happens next? How does a case like this proceed? What are the implications? What are the ramifications? How does it go about? That's why I'm very thankful to have on our expert here today, and this is Professor Tung from Lewis and Clark College. And Professor, thank you very much for being here. You know, this is a very obviously complicated investigation that's going on, and I think that's what I wanted to ask to start off is how does a multi-state investigation like this even proceed?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. So one of the reasons that we have the FBI and the FBI has jurisdiction over cases like this is that instead of having local police take the lead, the problem with that is that if you have different crimes in different states, then each one has to be investigated by a different local police agency. So they have to come up with ways to coordinate their investigation. You may have issues about getting search warrants from judges. You have to have different judges. With the FBI, you have a essentially national police force that can cover all of these investigations, obviously with different agents, but through the same agency.
So that makes sense as opposed to having to coordinate all of these different agencies. And they did say there's so many, even just in the press conference today, or the news conference today, there were a lot of agencies involved just in this one extradition process to bring him back, let alone potentially these other states as well. So, so with the FBI, then, if I understand correctly, they can oversee all of that and maybe supersede and get past some barriers that could be happening otherwise in an investigation like this.
Right, yeah. So certainly I think it's unlikely the FBI is operating by itself. I think they are going to be working with the local agencies, but you have one overseeing entity that has jurisdiction, the ability to operate in all the states.
What would be some of the reasons, and just to ask the basic questions, what would be some of the reasons that we didn't get more information about any other potential victims or anything else that they believe he may have done?
So I think if you think of it from looking ahead, which is to say that eventually there would be presumably a trial or at least litigation over this. It could end up in a guilty plea, or I guess the charges can be dropped if they think that they don't have the evidence. But, you know, we sort of generally think that we're looking toward a trial down the road. And so if you have a trial, one of the things that the prosecution will be obligated to do is to enter into discovery and turn over information to the defense. And so until then, though, the FBI might want to be holding back some of their key details, because the more you reveal now, the earlier head start the defense can have on getting its case ready. Also, you might be worried about influencing or tainting the investigation into other areas. As you mentioned, there are anticipated to be other victims. You want the information to come forward, not because people are sort of responding to what the FBI has already said. Then they might just be parroting the information. If you instead just simply say there may be other victims, the people come forward, you get a sense of whether they have accurate information or not based on what they're telling the FBI.
So that makes sense. So just to see what kind of information does come to them, even if they do already know some things, and see what people can present to them. Looking at this too, you know, from I guess the legal standpoint, from the potential prosecution standpoint of this, how does that? I mean, there's so many. Going back to what we were talking about, there's so many different agencies and people potentially involved in this. Is this something that would be prosecuted maybe on a state-by-state basis? Would it all be, if there are victims, you know, in other states? We already do know we have a multi-state issue right here, just with Seattle to Klamath Falls. If there are a lot of situations like this, how is something like this prosecuted? Would it be once in Oregon, once in, say, some other state, wherever that could happen, or is it all at once?
Well, it can't be all at once because the defendant can only be in one place at one time. So that gets a little bit complicated for the following reason, that the double jeopardy clause of the Constitution says you can't be twice put in jeopardy for the same crime. Now, the U.S. Supreme Court has said that only applies at the individual jurisdictional level. So, for example, Oregon could not try somebody twice for the same crime. But if the United States, meaning the federal courts, were to try somebody, that's a different jurisdiction from Oregon, and double jeopardy does not apply. So that would seem to suggest you could have both state and federal prosecutions, or even two different states. The complication is that Oregon is one of the states that in its own constitution says that, well, but we actually think that it is double jeopardy, even if it's a different jurisdiction. So timing-wise, what that means is that if the defendant were to be prosecuted first in federal court, Oregon would actually bar the same prosecution for the same crime. But if it went in the other direction, which is to say if Oregon went first, that prosecution would not be barred in federal court. So there may be some jockeying in that sense about, you know, who should go first because of the asymmetry of double jeopardy. That's one issue. Another one would be, so in this case, I think from the facts as alleged by the FBI, it sounds like the entire crime occurred within the confines of Oregon, even though the suspect was later arrested in Nevada. But if you had a situation where, let's say, a victim were captured, oh no, actually, I'm sorry, I have that wrong. The victim was taken to Seattle, right? So yeah, state lines. So that gives the FBI easy jurisdiction because you're a multi-state offense. But then kidnapping is, in a sense, a unitary crime, even though it spans 2 states. It's one, the victim has been taken against their will, allegedly. So Washington state would have jurisdiction over the crime, but Oregon would as well. And so those 2 states would have to work out, okay, who's going to go first. And I think Washington also has this view of double jeopardy that Oregon does. And so, they may actually have to work out, if only one state gets to go, who's going to be handling the case if in state court. So those are a lot of complications that come up when you have these multi-state crimes, meaning a crime that spans more than one state.
Yeah, and that's just Washington and Oregon, and with the FBI believing that there's victims probably, potentially anyway, in these other states, according to them, and that's what they're looking for information. They did say that they believe they have some kind of knowledge of up to 4. This is from the FBI's statement and press release. They didn't give any more details on that, and they think that there could be more out there. So yeah, this is definitely a very complicated issue that's coming out there. So a couple of other questions, or at least one other, I guess, from your viewpoint, and I understand, I'm just asking for your opinions on this and your knowledge, but how, now that this, he's in Washoe County, he's in Nevada right now, they're trying to extradite him over to here. What happens next, I guess, just from that standpoint, from what we know so far?
Assuming that so he could waive extradition, meaning just agree to be transported, or he could fight it, and then there would have to be an extradition hearing. Essentially, you'd have to show that there's probable cause to believe the crime has been committed. It would be a crime in Nevada as well as here. I think all of that would be fairly easy to satisfy from the sounds of the allegations. So the next step would be to get an indictment, formal charging instrument against the suspect, and then arraignment, and then all of that would lead to appointment of counsel if the suspect is indigent. If not, then the suspect has to arrange for counsel, and then we're off into the pre-trial process, which now in federal court. So again, let's assume that this is going to be the FBI leading the case. It ends up in U.S. District Court, handled by an assistant United States attorney. The Speedy Trial Act says that the presumption is that a defendant will be brought to trial within 70 days of indictment or arraignment, whichever is later. That's 70 business days, which is pretty fast, but that's because we have a right to a speedy trial. However, for a number of reasons, that are requested by the parties or on the judge's own initiative, the judge can delay the trial time. Now the judge has to make a separate finding for each one of these, and it can't just be indefinitely. It has to be, okay, I'm going to continue the trial for 3 months or whatever amount of time for the following reasons. Typically that would be because the defense needs much more time to prepare the case, which is common in white collar cases when you have, in some instances, literally millions of documents, pages of documents. In this case, there may be forensic evidence that the defense will want to have its chance to test and look at the test results from the government and so on. And so that might be some reason to continue the trial, meaning to delay it a bit. But the default assumption would be 70 days. Like I said, it probably would be extended beyond that, but that would be the next step.
All right, that's definitely, so 70 days, but probably extended. Yeah, and it's something with this that would make sense with so many different agencies and so much evidence and whatever else they're looking for, probably to go through on that. Professor, anything else that you think people should know, or any legal insight that you want to provide for this? And you may not have something, but I appreciate your time, so I wanted to ask.
Yeah, no, I think that's pretty thorough.
Yeah, it was very thorough, and really appreciate your help on that. And help to understand what's going on. Again, this is for everybody watching too. This is all information that just came out this morning. You know, everybody's trying to ascertain what's going on. We've really only had a couple of hours of knowledge of this and to figure out where we go from here. But Professor, I thank you very much for taking some time to join me here on Fox 12 Now. Appreciate you being here.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me on.
And for everybody watching, we have the full coverage at kptv.com, of course, where you can read up on everything that we just discussed right there. And all the information as we get it will be put there. If there's more breaking news that comes out, you can join me right here for Fox 12 Now, which is live streaming on our social media channels, our apps, on the website. So lots of places to come here for that. And especially if we're outside of our regular newscast hours, this is a good place to go. We'll have our newscast at 4 p.m. We'll have all the details that'll be happening then. We have reporters on the ground heading to Klamath Falls. So we'll bring you everything as soon as we get it, as soon as we know. And again, joining right here is a good way to find out all that information as well. We get experts like the professor on here to talk about that. Coming up here at around 2 p.m. Pacific, I just want to give you a heads up on this. I am going to be talking about a data breach that happened for Oregon health plans. The Oregon Health Authority released some information here this morning, a press release about a data breach that could affect over 1 million different Oregonians. It could have a huge effect, and this was something that got a little lost in the shuffle with everything else going on. So we're going to dig deeper into that. I'm going to get you information on that. We have an expert hopefully joining us here around 2 p.m., but I'll give you all the details around then. In the meantime, kptv.com. Check everything out right there for all the information that we have on all of these stories. I'm Greg Nibbler. This is Fox 12 Now.